name is Brittany New, and I'm an entrepreneur and digital marketing consultant living in Barcelona. I'm here with Dr. Dave Asomaning, who's an executive coach. Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you do before we get into this month's miracle conversation?
Fantastic, Brittany. Thank you for doing this show with me. I love the work we do together and great collaboration. So, as you mentioned, I'm an executive coach and I live in Florida, on the east coast of Florida. So it's close to Palm Beach and it's on the I-95 corridor. So it's about 2.5 hours. Where I live is 2.5 hours north of Miami. So, and then it's two and a half maybe an hour and a half south of Orlando. So I'm close to all those locations and names that people might recognize. So yeah, I specialize in supporting CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, and other leaders to develop what I call miracle mindsets. So miracle mindsets then help my clients to lead improved lives through greater effectiveness, ease, and fulfillment, both on the professional side and on the personal side. So, this series that we've been doing this year, the 12 months of 2021, the series has been focused on forgiveness, the theme of forgiveness. And I'm beginning to sort of do internal inquiry about what the theme for next year would be. So, forgiveness this year, then there'll be a sort of a title for next year's theme, the 12 months of next year. So really excited about that too, finishing this one and then coming to another one for next year. So thanks, Brittany.
My pleasure. And so in this series, we try to take a lesson from A Course in Miracles and expand upon it and develop on it and relate it back to our theme for this year, which is forgiveness. And so today we're going to be discussing lesson number 169 from A Course in Miracles. If you ever want to read the lessons for yourself, there's a link in the description where you can read the entire lesson. And today's lesson says, "By grace I live, by grace I am released." So that is the kind of title of lesson 169. And today, Dave is going to break down the different aspects of this lesson for us and relate it to our theme for this year. So, Dave, why don't you just go ahead and take on this lesson and tell us what it's trying to teach us?
Thank you for that intro, Brittany, again. And so this is I'll admit that this is a long lesson and it's a complex lesson. And I think that one of the easiest ways to get into the lesson and retain a structure that helps us to keep using it and unpacking it effectively over time is metaphor. So that's a tool that we can use. So there are two different stories or metaphors that I'd like to use to organize this lesson. The first metaphor is a kind of a common everyday one. It's about driving, right? So there's driver's ed. If you choose to go that route to learn to become a good driver, you can practice on your own. A lot of us had older people teach us on a empty football field or something like that, how to parallel park, how to stop and start with accuracy, all the things you need to do to learn about signaling. And then as you get good handling the car that way, you can then get on the road and then you can get on the highway, get on and off. I mean, there are just so many different things that one has to do in order to maneuver a car safely and effectively. So I'm positioning that metaphor as a way of understanding what's in this lesson. This lesson has got a lot of different moving parts about um, uh, the forgiveness process. So forgiveness would be like parallel to driving overall, and all the subparts that are in this lesson are like all the different things that we could think of that are part of the driving experience. So, for instance, in this lesson, you've got forgiveness, right? So, forgiveness is one of the terms that obviously that's our theme. This lesson takes that as very important, but there's the phrase atonement, which is another sort of heavy duty term in the course, heavy duty in the sense that it contains a lot that has to be unpacked. There's the term holy instant that has to be unpacked. There's the phrase miracle, which is what we use for miracle mindset, but miracle itself. There's the phrase revelation. Um, then there's grace, which is sort of the main focus of this lesson, grace, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then there's the term heaven, right? So these are some of the main terms that are surfaced in this lesson, and each of them by itself you could write a whole book on, right? And so then this lesson is saying that the thing that ties all of these together in our everyday process is driving or forgiveness, right? Um, so forgiveness is the skill of, parallel to driving, and then these are all sort of different locations or aspects of what driving can help us to do, right? Or what's required to be a good driver. You need your insurance, you need your license, you need gas in the car, all these things. So I'm just trying to position at a sort of a 30,000 foot level, that we're still talking about forgiveness here, but there are a lot of terms that over time one would want to unpack for oneself in sort of getting a better understanding of this lesson. Without understanding each of the terms that I just went over, it's like, yeah, somebody knows the forgiveness piece, how to drive, but one may not be as skilled with some of the different things, like how to get on and off the highway, how to go on a 1,000-mile trip and what's involved in that, and so on. So hopefully that adds some structural clarity to the complexity I'm talking about. Well, we certainly don't have time to do all of the phrases I mentioned, and our focus is mainly on grace today and forgiveness. But Brittany, let me see if you have any initial reactions to any of that before I go further.
I guess my first, since grace is kind of like the main theme in the lesson, or the word that's thrown around the most, I guess I'd be curious to know if you have a good definition for grace. I was thinking more like synonyms. I would almost call it forgiveness or favor, like God's favor. So those are some synonyms that I would associate with grace. Some kind of, level of understanding towards someone or something that transcends,
Begin to like
transcend.
introduce that into Webster's. I think they do that every year. They know.
Transcedes. There was there's two words I combined there. I don't know what the other one was. All understanding, proceeds and transcends.
Yeah.
That's the definition I would give it. What would you say from your studies?
It's great. So your instincts about this are just spot on. That you would raise the question about, okay, Dave, you set up this metaphorical picture, driving. There's all these different things, but this lesson is really about grace. So your approach to it, spot on. Synonyms, all kinds of different sort of parallels that would make sense. And then we're just going to enlarge that and enrich that some more, right? So I think that what this lesson is trying to do about grace, in the first instance, is, as you were saying, bring our attention to the fact that there is something so far beyond the mechanics of forgiveness or the mechanics of driving and all the pieces that go into learning driving. And that it says in the lesson that grace is beyond learning, and it's beyond what learning is trying to teach. So while learning specific concepts and practices, these are all important skills in the driving process, if you will, there's a sort of a level of ecstasy and freedom that's way beyond all of that. And we know this, we've talked about therapy driving, for instance, before, right? So when you're in LA and you're doing therapy driving, I'm here, I'm not really focused on the mechanics of driving. The driving almost takes care of itself, and I'm in this transcendent state where I'm just thinking things through, I'm enjoying some music, I'm watching things around me. I'm just in an elevated state that goes way beyond my initial learning how to back up, how to parallel park, how to get on the highway. I'm not thinking about any of that, right? So grace is this in this lesson, it's the lesson wants to point to the fact that there are amazing, rewarding experiences that lie way beyond the mechanics of practicing forgiveness, for instance, or the basics of how to drive. Right now, all of them come from God's love. It's sort of like a one-way expression of love from God to us. There's nothing we do to make it happen. It's already existing, all this abundance. It's like if your parent puts millions of dollars into your will for you, when they're no longer around. It's like we didn't do anything to earn it or deserve it. They gave it to us because they love us. Again, not to be mercenary about everything. I'm just trying to give a quick example on that. So, I mean, this lesson is trying to draw our attention to the fact that there's this infinite, incredible, amazing love that exists towards us outside of space and time before we do anything to deserve it. And that at the end of all of our learning, that's the state in which we are going to enter. And it's similar then to one of the other terms I mentioned, which we won't get into too much, which is the state of heaven, right? Where all struggle is done, all suffering is done, and we are enjoying an eternal state of God's grace, right? So any reactions to that, and then we'll keep going.
I like the idea that just like driving, when you have kind of gotten into the habit of it, you can, sort of forget about it and it's second nature. And we all can understand that that's the constant nature that God is already in, that the source is already in. So taking the time to get to that point would be, I guess, reaching that state of grace that you said, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. It's a transcendent state. And most of, 99
Transcending
there you
state.
go. Transcending. I love that. I'm telling you, we're going to be in Webster's dictionary with some new words and concepts and ideas before you know it. So that's very good. I love that. No, I love it. So yeah, 99.999% of all of that is coming from God towards us, right? And yet there's some free will issues here. And so this is the last thing I wanted to point out here before we get to some of the practical applications for today. Let me just see if I can quickly find the section that I found the hardest in this lesson. I'll just point out real quickly why it seems hard and then what I think a potential solution to it could be to understanding it. So it's in paragraph 7 where I'll just read the whole thing and then I'll explain what I think is difficult about it and then what the solution is. So, paragraph 7 of this lesson says, this is beyond experience we try to hasten, the state of grace, right? Yet forgiveness, taught and learned, brings with it the experiences which bear witness that the time the mind itself determined to abandon all but this is now at hand. We do not hasten it in that what you will offer was concealed from him who teaches what forgiveness means. I was like, what? Okay. We do not hasten it in that what you will offer was concealed from him who teaches what forgiveness means. So this last sentence, it was like a riddle to me. Like, okay, everything we do in A Course in Miracles is intended to accelerate our process of unloading and shedding all the negative, illusory thinking we have from the malicious ego so we can enter into the state of grace, right? But then and then God is sort of all knowing about that process on so many different levels. So I was thrown for a loop here when it said, we do not hasten it in that what you will offer was concealed from him who teaches what forgiveness means. I was like, okay, so then it seems like it's saying, we can't hasten it. And I think what it means there is that the state of grace in its finality already exists. And there's nothing we're doing to accelerate its existence. It already exists, right? Then the next part of this is that in that what you will offer was concealed from him who teaches what forgiveness means. So the forgiveness process is the thing that accelerates our entry into the state of grace. But when we will do that, is not necessarily something that the divine knows about us because of free will. So I
Okay.
think that's
Okay.
what the breakdown is there.
Mhm.
And then the story that I mentioned, that there were two metaphors. So the first one was the driving metaphor, and then the second one was the story of the prodigal son, which I like
Mhm.
to reframe as the story of the prodigal child, just to be, non-gender biased about it.
I like
So
that.
yeah, so so in that story, the child leaves. We've used this on occasion before. I don't want to rehash the whole thing in elaborate detail, but the main arc of the story is that the child leaves against the protests of the parent, who says, "Stay here. You've got everything here." That's the location of grace. That's the space of grace. That's sort of like heaven. And the child is like, "No, no, no, I gotta go. I gotta go make my own way." And so, because of free will, the parent says, I really hate that you have to go. I wish you wouldn't go, but here's your inheritance. And if it's what you want, then go." And then the child goes on a long, long journey. And then that journey eventually ends up being full of suffering and pain and famine and lack and scarcity. And at some point, the child then decides to go back home, because in the child's mind, even being a servant in the original home would be better than suffering here on some level. So
Yeah.
again, the reason I bring all of this in is because I think it helps to explain this very difficult last sentence that I was talking about in paragraph 7, where the parent doesn't chase after the child, doesn't go into the wilderness with the child, stays in a state of grace,
Mhm.
making that strong and then using it as a magnet to attract the child back.
Mhm.
But the timing of when the child will come back is not ultimately up to the parent,
Mhm.
which is where I say it's concealed. That's the sentence where the timing of it is concealed even from the parent, because it's up to the child. They have to
Mhm.
decide,
Right.
and they could have done it in the first week of, "Oh, this is not the right place for me. I'm going back home." Maybe they took 10 years to get back home, but that's within the free will of the child, right? So, but when the child gets back, this is the flavor of grace that's amplified in the story. When the child gets back, parent is ecstatic with joy. "Oh my God, you're back. I thought you were dead. I thought you were lost forever. You're back. Let's have a party, bring out the best clothes." There's just heaping of love upon layers of love upon layers of love on the child. And there's no questioning, there's no credit check, there's no collateral request, there's nothing like that. And the older sibling who stayed is the one who is kind of hating a little bit, like, "Well, why are you giving this child who returned all this special treatment?" So, um, I just bring that in to sort of give a set of images, symbolic images, that can help us unpack this very difficult sentence in paragraph 7 that I was talking about. And maybe this is, you know, for a lot of people, it's way too in the weeds, maybe, I don't know, but I just wanted to do some justice to that phrase in case somebody's reading it and they bump up against it, and it's
Yeah.
like, how do we sort this out? And I didn't want to just gloss over it in a kind of careless way. So that's number one. And then number two, the prodigal son story really does show how, at the end of the day, for each of us doing miracle mindset and practicing, the ultimate goal is not just to learn how to drive on the road back, but to get into that state of grace, to
Mhm.
get to that destination where we just experience nonstop, for the rest of our existence, this state of infinite love from the source. So that's I think that's as much as I wanted to cover, with regard to the technicalities of this lesson. Anything you
Okay.
wanna say or comment on, and then we'll do some application like we usually do.
Yeah, maybe just another question about. I know that the course never is dualistic about certain things. So sometimes with a story, a metaphor like that one, it feels a little bit like, when they're lost, they're not in the state of grace. And so it confuses me because it's like okay, maybe you could say grace is always there and available. So in that way, you're never separated, but the illusion, I think I'm answering my own question now. I think it's the illusion that's separating you. And in reality, it's always kind of available, but you don't really tap into it. Maybe that's one way of looking at it. But the story of running away and coming back, it's all an illusion. Yeah, that's it.
The whole trip is an illusion. This life that we live physically
Yeah.
in our bodies, that's the point of the course, is the whole thing is an illusion. It's a simulation. It's a matrix. It's something that was generated by the malicious ego to get us off track with the promise of something better in a far country away from our home in grace. You totally answered it. You hit the ball out of the park. Yep, that's exactly right. And everything, I mean, once we grasp this, then everything in the course becomes reducible to this non-dualistic understanding, right? That everything that's related to the physicality of reality, the body and everything that the body sees is all part of the matrix that the ego generated, or the simulation of a real interesting world that keeps us obsessively distracted from the place of real grace, where we actually belong. And it's so much more powerful and abundant. And people are like, what? I don't have a body there? Wait, I want to enjoy ice cream and I want to enjoy roller skating and surfing. That can't be, that can't be much fun. But it's a real misunderstanding of the deprivation that we live in. It's like the prodigal son or child saying, man, I went into this place and I was eating with the pigs and it was the greatest experience, eating with the pigs. I was like, yeah, really? That was a great experience. Okay. So, I mean, it's in relative terms, everything in the illusion, it's very binary. We're in the illusion where it's not real, but the place of reality that we're learning to drive back into, it just holds so much promise that we misinterpret, and think of as less than somehow. So great question.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that, or
Well,
adding on to the clarity.
Just to be clear to the audience, you answered it perfectly. I was just riffing on the theme that you set up there.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much. So yeah, go ahead and lead us into some practical applications of this lesson.
Practical application overall is more general in the sense that I don't at this point on these shows know how to break into specific client testimonials, like a client transformed their mindset into a miracle mindset and got this benefit, just because of confidentiality. I'm trying to hold myself to a strict standard around that until I get a sense of how to do it better, right? So for now, it's sort of the remnants of being a recovering psychotherapist, where you don't talk about your clients and you keep a lot of, sort of anonymity and confidentiality. But having said that, one of the things I'm really, really deeply grateful for is that the miracle mindset concept and practice in the coaching that I'm doing is getting deeper and richer. I said this on the last call, and I'll probably continue to say it. I might sound like a broken record without giving a lot of specifics, but there's a way in which it feels like I'm going deeper with my clients, where we talk about miracle mindset, and for the people for whom it's the right fit, it makes sense to them. They really lean into it with the help of these types of lessons, and they get the concepts, like sort of what you just expressed about what's the difference between a dualistic approach and a non-dualistic approach, and how everything in the physical world is an illusion, just as an example, and that there is a place of reality that you can tap into. And if you're committed to tapping into that, then you can have these incredible breakthroughs as a kind of an outcome of that commitment, right? So in the month since we talked, I've heard clients talk about, oh, I totally re-engineered my business so that it has this miracle mindset at the foundation of it. And I've just made my life so much easier. Like I was holding on to things that were going to take me into that far country and make me really struggle and just have all this difficulty and hardship. And so whether it's actually restructuring the business, or I've had clients talk about the career path they're on and how they've used these miracle mindset concepts to like pivot to a career path that really feels like it's a collaboration with source, and that because of that there's miracles that are just sort of abounding. Or I've had people talk about this with regard to their health, and how sort of like my heart miracle, which we've talked about at other places at other times. It's amazing when a client says to me, yeah, I was told that I had this, you know, this terminal thing that was going to kill me in like 6 months or a year. And I went back for all the tests and they said, we kid you not, there's nothing there. Whatever was there. And I was like, well, that's exactly what happened to me with my heart. I went back and they told me there was nothing there. Wow, amazing. I had no idea. So again, I don't want to make exaggerated claims. I always say this, it's not about replacing the medical with any of this stuff, all these disclaimers, but it really is very gratifying to see that this material is teachable and that the mindset can be transformed so that one increasingly comes out of egocentric struggle that's needless and just, heartbreaking in some ways, into a place of greater and greater peace because of partnership with the source of grace, right? So I know that the applications are somewhat generic, and I don't want to just devolve into like, oh, just trying to sell this whole thing with testimonials and things like that. But I mean, this is, for me, is genuinely heartfelt, client experiences of making breakthroughs because of either on the personal side or the professional side because of miracle mindset. So back over to you, Brittany. Anything you want to say or ask, and then we'll have covered the things that we usually cover in this show now.
I guess one thing that came to mind while you were speaking was how, this is something that is an ongoing thread in this whole series, in the whole topic of miracle mindset, is that it can be pretty hard to explain this to people. That's why your work is so important. That's your job. And for those people like me or anyone watching who are learning this and practicing this, I can imagine and I can attest to the fact that it can be lonely to feel like, we have access to all of this great potential and we want to practice it and we want to believe it and take advantage of it, but we can't really always explain it to other people so well. And even I would, just to be honest, people watching this series, it's not for people who've never heard of miracle mindset before. Maybe we're trying to obviously make it digestible to any audience, but for someone to really understand it, I would suggest them to read your book, frankly. That could take it from the beginning, what a miracle mindset is. We throw around miracle mindset often here as if people are already familiar. They probably found this video because they know about it. So in terms of finding, I don't know, a sense of community in miracle mindsets, and this isn't really related to the lesson, it's just something that came up and feels relevant. What would you suggest to someone who's, has a professional network of people who've never heard of miracle mindset, besides, recommending all of them to read your book? What would you recommend to maintaining the high vibrations? It's what came up when you were speaking. I don't remember which word or phrase triggered it, but it's very detrimental to be around people who are so stuck in the malicious ego. And it can be very hard to escape every single day, especially in some very toxic work cultures. So what would you recommend as a base? Like, it makes me tempted to just eliminate all my relationships with people who are, not only toxic, but aren't striving for the miracles,
Wow, that's a great question. And I do this a lot when I go back and watch our interviews and stuff. I'm always thanking you for your questions. And I mean, I'm not just doing it mechanically. I really do appreciate the thoughtfulness you put into your questions. And so thank you for that question. And there are a lot of different dimensions to the answer. I'll keep it brief and targeted. So on a very practical level, we've got a Facebook group where it's young, it's embryonic, but it is intended as the place
Okay.
where anyone who's interested in, can come to and join it and continue on the journey, right? So there, eventually, when we have a critical threshold of people, there'll be more interaction, there'll be more support, right? But everybody who comes in, um, there's just light screening with the questions to get in, right? So, um, are you do you see yourself as a leader, for instance? Will you follow the guy? All the stuff that you see to join a Facebook group, but
And this isn't just for clients. It's not a private group just for clients. It's for anyone.
Okay.
Okay.
anyone at all.
Good to know.
But what I do look at is if you
Somebody to be
answered
in
the
it.
questions, right?
Yeah.
If a person doesn't answer the questions, then I'm like, okay, I don't know. But it doesn't mean that they're automatically disqualified. But it's just a screening process to make sure that they're interested in this, and we're not going to get people who aren't interested and for some reason are just trying to get into the group, right? But it's Nightmares to Miracles. We'll put a link to it. We
Yeah,
can
I'll
put
put the link below.
to the group. So that's on a practical level. On a more metaphysical level, part of what I think works, and I'm seeing with each of the client cases that I surfaced but didn't get into specifics, that many specifics about, what always seems to happen is that as the client begins to really, or a person, it could be anybody, it doesn't have to be a client with me, it could be, like you said, anybody from any walk of life who really loves the idea of miracle mindset and wants to start developing it, right? So for anybody, when we really get intent on doing it, higher power or source begins to send us our students. In other words, the people who we will teach,
Okay.
because the more we teach it, the faster we learn it. So it's an act of kindness and grace to us that we get sent people to teach the miracle mindset concepts that we currently know. And I had somebody ask me, they were like, why is it that it's easier to apply it when people approach us with their problems? And I can talk all day about miracle mindset for them, but when it comes to my life, I'm like not really doing it. I said, wait, that's exactly how it's supposed to work. It's not that you're a hypocrite, and it's not that you have to be all fixed before you can teach, but higher power actually does it as an act of kindness for us to send us people that we can talk to about it, so that we're like, wait a minute, I better get going with applying this to myself too on a deeper level. And that's how we keep then. It's amazing how that works. So it's built in, and it's not just a Facebook group. Facebook groups are important. I don't mean to denigrate them, but my point is that source is really involved. Higher power is involved in that process of sending the allies. If that makes sense. Does that?
Yeah, that's a great, excellent answer to your question, and definitely not something I would have come up with myself. So that's great. And so just to build on that, I encourage anyone watching, if you feel that if you want to expand your personal network of people who want to think like this, try to think about the people in your life. And the reality is not everyone is open to changing their mindset at every moment, but you probably have someone in your life that might be open to it, and maybe try to mention it, bring it up. Ask them, in your normal conversations with them, what you talk about in life, whether it's business or anything. Try to find a way to link it to this type of thinking and this opportunity expansive thinking, and see how receptive they are to it. And it could be a point of conversation with you. Another thing I wanted to add is I do this with my boyfriend. He's not, it's not natural for him to come across this type of content or this type of thinking. So I kind of, encourage him to be positive and those kind of things. And he's receptive to that. But then what you said about, it's funny, it's a lot easier to give advice and to do that than to take your own advice sometimes. He kind of challenges me and throws it back at me in a kind of spiteful way that actually works. And so, we've got this thing going back and forth. Today I was saying, oh, there's no parking. And he's like, well, look at the bright side, in a kind of spiteful way. I'm like, okay, there is a spot. You're right.
It's like, where's your miracle mindset? You're trying to teach me about miracle mindset. Where's yours?
Yeah. And I try not to take it negatively. I try to embrace it. And I'm like, thank you. That's good for reminding me. And I want it to go both ways. So it's true. Even someone who might not be as open or receptive as the person who you thought of, they might in a spiteful way help you to practice what you preach. And that helps too.
Yeah, beautiful illustration of exactly this teaching learning dynamic that the course is very intentional and elaborate about in some places, where it says the teacher is the student and the student is the teacher. And that dynamic is constantly going on between any two people. You illustrated that so beautifully, where you may have more of the terminology and you may have more driving skills, to use our metaphor from today, but your boyfriend is going to be an effective teacher for you by raising questions about how you're applying it and so on. It's a beautiful illustration. There's two other things I wanted to underscore too. You mentioned the book, and it was interesting that just as you were starting to mention, I was like, oh, that could be an easy way, relatively easy way for people to tap into community around this, right? The people who get what the book is saying, and it's a roadmap about this, and it's as we've said many times before, it represents uh, the soup to nuts of the coaching process. So you can easily read through it to get a sense of how my coaching program is structured to introduce miracle mindset and to keep it in a person's mind in a sustained way, whether or not you're a CEO or an executive and all of that. So that's one aspect of what I wanted to raise, about how people can plug in to community around the book. The same Facebook group that we just talked about is about the book. It's about the coaching. It's about the course. There isn't a lot of selling in there, right? It really is just to aggregate community around all of this. And then the other thing that I've heard some of my clients and allies do is that when they're sharing and trying to teach, they'll share a lesson from the course that was particularly helpful in shifting their mindset. So they won't just say, for instance, oh, just go look at A Course in Miracles, or they'll pick one lesson that was life-changing for them, right? Which is, again, the benefit of each of these studies we've done, right? And especially, for instance, the one we did in April on grievances, let miracles replace all grievances, the April lesson. That one can be very transformative for people who are angry and are burning with, there's specific exercises in there to do your inventory and things like that. So that's another way to join in community. Best practices. I'm just sharing the best practices from our emerging community, things that people have said that it makes it easy for them to, and then the person they shared it with will be like, yeah, I'm reading and I'm rereading that lesson, and I'm beginning to see what it's saying, and it's helping me shift more into miracle mindset. So a lot of different ways to talk about how we're in community non-locally.
Well, thank you for expanding on that and providing those tips. And yeah, definitely going to be recommending your book to anyone who's interested, because it's got all the information there. So I was just like, I'm not going to say a word. Here's the Bible of no, I should.
Well, thank you.
Mindset Bible.
Yeah, right. Miracle Mindset Bible. Thank you. And you did an excellent interview. I'm still really flying high off of the interview you did with me. Also this month, actually, it's September. It's posted in our different places, the podcast channel and the YouTube channel and so on. But I really, I love how you conducted that interview, helping me to express what the book was about. So the whole thing is focused on the book. And I really can't tell you how much I appreciate. I can't say enough about how I appreciate that you are helping me to get the book out to the world, right? We always say, or I always say, it's not about a hard sell and trying to push the book where it wouldn't be wanted, or the message behind the book, even more importantly, but it's really making it available for those people for whom it would be life changing, and it would be the right thing for them to add to their toolkit, either as leaders or as lay people, but just to strengthen their sense of miracle mindset. So I love where we are with everything. We got a gentle, nice, comfortable process of extending this into the world, but not doing it through a very aggressive hard sell type of approach. Yeah, I love it.
Right. Yep. It's the miracle flow.
So just to conclude, so the lesson ends with these phrases. It says, by grace I live, by grace I am released. That's sort of the first two phrases that it ends with, and then it follows that by saying, "By grace I give, by grace I will release." Right. So this is a theme we've seen again and again and again. The whole purpose of learning to drive, learning to do forgiveness work, is that we get released from our illusions about ourselves, the hallucinations we have about how bad we are or how sinful we are or how, unfortunate or scarcity oriented we are. We get released by releasing, forgiving ourselves through God's power to restore us, and then we help other people with their journey of release. I just love how it does that. It reminds us that we're doing this to get free, and then we're helping other people to get free. So
Right.
yeah, that's where I'd like to end it. Unless you have something you wanted to react to that with.
No, I'm so glad you mentioned that and reiterated that those last two lines because I noticed those two as being very profound. So I'm glad that you mentioned it. All right. Well, thank you for watching. Thanks to our audience. We really look forward to doing this every month. And forgiveness is a topic that we will never get tired of talking about, especially in regards to A Course in Miracles. There's so much content on the topic. I wonder if we index the word forgiveness from the Course, how many times would it appear?
Good point.
Maybe fun fact, we'll do that. So thank you for watching. And as always, be sure to leave a comment or like the video. If you want to help, give us some feedback or just tell the YouTube algorithm that you like the content that we're producing. That always helps. And share the video with a friend if you found it interesting as well. Another way to add some community to it. I'll also make sure that the link to the the Facebook channel, Facebook group is in the description of the video, and you guys can feel free to join. I'll be joining myself when I get off this call because I'm surprised I hadn't joined already. But thank you so much, Dave, for discussing with us, and I look forward to speaking with you next month.
Thank you, Brittany, for another wonderful time together doing the show, doing this series. Thank you to our audience. And thank you again, back to you, Brittany, for all the nuances you put into it about how people can connect with us and reach us and support us and like what we're doing. I really love what you added there. Thank you. So see you next month.
All right. See you next month. Bye.